subway, dozens wounded, and it could have been far worse. ISIS claims responsibility as the UK raises the threat level to critical. The Prime Minister warning another attack may be imminent. City on edge. Protesters stormed the streets in St. Louis after a white former cop is acquitted in the fatal shooting of a black man. A new flashpoint in Missouri, haunted by memories of Ferguson. A new hurricane threat getting too close for comfort. Al Roker has the new forecast track. Hazing investigation. A deadly incident involving a fraternity pledge rocks another big American university. And the final plunge after a 20-year mission, capturing some of the most spectacular images of our time. Nightly News begins right now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us. ISIS is now claiming credit for a bomb attack on a suburban London subway today as the UK braces for yet another possible hit. Late this evening, the threat level there elevated to critical, its highest level, meaning another attack is considered imminent. More than 24 people were injured in Britain's 5th terror attack of the year when the homemade device only partially detonated. Tonight, there is an all-out effort underway to find who did it. NBC's Kelly Kobiella has late details now from London.
Tonight, a massive manhunt is on for the person who sent a wall of fire and panic through the London subway. And multiple senior law enforcement officials briefed on the investigation say a suspect has now been identified.
The fireball just engulfed the whole tube carriage. Like, the whole carriage was orange, just like coming towards us.
It happened at 8:20 in the morning in a quiet suburb west of the city. The train packed with commuters and children on their way to school.
There were a lot of people who had burns around their face and the upper parts of their body.
Afterward, the device sitting in the subway car by the train doors still in flames. Authorities quickly calling it a terror attack. Homes near the tracks evacuated. Ian Walworth saw the SWAT team from his balcony.
And then I heard a big loud bang at the door and we were told to evacuate. So it was quite serious and we had to leave.
Did you smell anything?
I did, yes. I smelled there was a chemical burning.
And it could have been worse. The homemade bomb did not fully explode, which could help authorities track down suspects.
Though the attack was relatively ineffective, it is part of a series of quickening attacks in London that not only worries officials in London and the UK, but also in Europe and in the United States.
It's now the 5th time this year Britain has been a target for terror, including the suicide bombing at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester and a car attack and stabbing at the iconic Parliament. Tonight, the Prime Minister defiant.
The threat of terrorism that we face is severe, but together, by working together, we will defeat them.
And tonight, those same U.S. law enforcement officials briefed on this say there was a timer on that device and it didn't detonate properly. ISIS has claimed responsibility for this, but police here say so far there's no evidence of a direct link. Lester?
Kelly Kobiella tonight in London. Thank you. Meantime, this evening, President Trump is facing fresh scrutiny after firing off a series of messages on Twitter after the London attack, including one that took a swipe at UK authorities. He then turned his focus to his embattled travel plan. We get details from our chief White House correspondent, Hallie Jackson.
Hours after the explosion in London, an eruption of tweets online from President Trump blaming a loser terrorist for the subway attack, adding, "These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard." That reference to the London law enforcement agency raising questions.
Does he know something we don't?
I never think it's helpful for anybody to speculate on what is an ongoing investigation.
The Prime Minister, polite but pointed.
Did the President share information that he wasn't supposed to? And if not, why was he speculating?
I think what the President was communicating is that obviously all of our law enforcement efforts are focused on this terrorist threat from, for years. He means generally that this kind of activity is what we're trying to prevent.
It all came up in Theresa May's call today with President Trump, in which the U.S. promised close collaboration with the U.K.
Our absolute commitment to eradicating the terrorists from our planet.
That fight against terror is why the administration says it's taking its fight for the travel ban to the Supreme Court next month, which will hear arguments on the order that restricts people from 6 mostly Muslim countries. Critics call it religious profiling, insisting it wouldn't make this country any safer. But the president wants to go even further, tweeting today after the London attack, the U.S. ban should be far larger, tougher, and more specific.
Why is he fighting for it if it's in fact too small, not tough enough, and too broad?
It's a step in the right direction.
This week, the Trump administration got a partial win on that travel ban when the Supreme Court agreed to let current restrictions on refugees stay in place. But the administration also gave up the fight over keeping out grandparents of citizens who want visas. Arguments on all this set for October 10th. Lester.
All right, Hallie Jackson of the White House, thanks. The Trump administration and leaders from around the world condemn North Korea's latest missile launch today. The president's national security advisor said there are military options to stop North Korea, but said those are not the preferred options. We get more on the simmering tensions tonight from our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel.
Kim Jong-un's latest missile launch set off alarms and cell phone alerts in Japan, urging people to find shelter, including this American tourist.
Well, that's a nice wake-up call. My phone translated as a North Korean missile launch.
It was an intermediate-range ballistic missile launched around 6:30 a.m. local time. It traveled 2,300 miles over northern Japan, landing in the Pacific Ocean. The U.S. military said it posed no threat to American territory. Guam is far to the south, which Kim Jong-un has threatened before. South Korea responded to the launch by firing 2 missiles of its own into the sea, but at the same distance they'd have to travel to hit the North Korean launch site. Hours later, the UN convened an emergency session just days after imposing new sanctions, watered down by Russia and China. But President Trump today, again, talking up the military option.
After seeing your capabilities and commitment here today, I am more confident than ever that our options in addressing this threat are both effective and overwhelming.
Kim Jong-un has learned from his father and his grandfather that military provocations to the United States and South Korea we never actually respond to. I fear he has misjudged the current situation.
2 weeks ago, Kim Jong-un detonated what is widely believed to have been a hydrogen bomb. The young Kim Jong-un has carried out more missile tests than his predecessors combined. And tonight, there are mounting signs he may be preparing for a new nuclear test.
Kim Jong-un tonight vowed to complete his country's nuclear weapons program despite the sanctions. The goal to, quote, reach an equilibrium with the United States. It seems U.S. sanctions are still not deterring the regime. Lester.
Richard Engel, thank you. In this country, it was a tense day in St. Louis after a judge found a white former police officer not guilty of murder in the shooting death of a black man after a high-speed car chase 6 years ago. The police were on high alert for the verdict, and this evening there are protests that are still ongoing. NBC's Blake McCoy is there.
Things got ugly early as protesters clashed with police on the streets of St. Louis.
No justice! No peace!
Some promising more unrest.
We are going to shut this city down.
Police have responded with a show of force tonight after a judge's decision to acquit former St. Louis police officer Jason Stockley in the shooting death of Anthony Lamar Smith. Smith was shot dead after a police chase in 2011. Stockley claimed he saw the suspected drug dealer reach for a gun, but only the officer's DNA was found on the weapon, leading to allegations that it was planted. Officer Stockley can be heard on dashcam during the chase say he's going to kill Smith. In issuing his decision today, the judge said he couldn't say that the state had proved every element of murder beyond a reasonable doubt.
The verdict has created frustration and anger for many in our community.
Smith leaves behind a young daughter. His family spoke through an attorney.
They were shocked.
The case has echoes of the 2014 unrest in nearby Ferguson following the fatal shooting of Michael Brown by a white police officer. Brown's family has been in contact with the Smiths.
I'm reliving right now what this family going through.
Tonight, concern that protests will grow, forcing this community to relive Ferguson as well.
Many businesses here in downtown St. Louis closed early today. You can see barricades in front of the courthouse, and schools have canceled after-school activities. The governor has even placed the National Guard on standby should things escalate. Lester?
Blake McCoy tonight, thank you. As we head into the weekend, we're monitoring a new hurricane threat swirling in the Atlantic. Jose has been meandering around the Atlantic for more than a week, but now the new forecast track takes it a bit too close for comfort for folks on the East Coast. Al Roker is here. Al, where's it headed?
Well, right now, Lester, it's going to be running parallel to the U.S. coast. Currently, it's 640 miles south-southeast of Cape Hatteras, 75-mile-per-hour winds, moving northwest at 10. So Cape Hatteras is within that cone of uncertainty, or at least the effects of it, because we're going to see dangerous surf this weekend. Monday, we're looking for rain and wind in the North Carolina Outer Banks. It continues up. And within the cone of uncertainty, coastal New Jersey, New York, Boston, tropical storm winds near shore, potential for coastal flooding by Wednesday, down to a tropical storm, but it's got plenty of warm water to start to really intensify. But as it gets closer, Lester, to the northeast, colder water, so it may weaken. But we're going to have to continue to watch this right through the weekend.
All right, Al Roker, good to have you here. Thank you. 5 days after Hurricane Irma smashed into Florida, utility companies say they have now restored power to almost 80% of homes and businesses that lost it. However, officials say almost 2 million are still without electricity. We learned that another person died and at least 7 were injured when carbon monoxide from generators seeped into their homes. That raises the death toll there to 25. Parts of the Caribbean remain in a much more dire situation tonight. In tiny Barbuda, officials say 95% of the properties have been destroyed. Barbuda's ambassador to the U.S. says the entire island has been evacuated, and a civilization that has existed for over 300 years has been extinguished, as he put it. The U.S. Virgin Islands were also hard hit. NBC's Stephanie Rule has more from St. John tonight.
Today, we got a first-hand look at Irma's wrath on St. John. You cannot go anywhere on this island without hearing incredible stories of survival.
I was underneath my house. I could listen to my house fall apart upstairs. But I have my kids, I have my wife there with me, and so I have to be strong.
So much of St. John is completely destroyed. Officials say schools could be closed for a year.
One of the things that's the most stunning, the vegetation gone. A week ago, this was lush and green. Now it looks completely burnt out. It truly looks like a war zone.
And tonight, many are left without a livelihood on an island where tourism is critical.
I work at the Westin, and that was destroyed, so I don't have a job right now.
Liston Monsanto Jr. runs the Chateau Bordeaux restaurant, once famous for its picturesque views, now completely flattened.
How long is it going to take to rebuild? Will you rebuild?
This is a resilient community, and that they will rebuild.
People here told us they're determined to help each other rebuild. An island living up to its nickname, Love City. Stephanie Rule, NBC News, St. John.
There was a new salvo today in a war of words between President Trump and a prominent sportscaster on ESPN. This all began Monday when Jemele Hill called the president a white supremacist. And today on Twitter, he demanded an apology. Let's get more from NBC's Peter Alexander.
President Trump, who's long made the news media a target.
Fake news. Fake news.
Tonight, taking aim at the sports network ESPN.
We're going to see a lot of teams off to slower starts.
After African-American anchor Jemele Hill tweeted, "Donald Trump is a white supremacist." Hill is co-anchor of ESPN's flagship Sports Center. In a series of tweets Monday, Hill called Mr. Trump the most ignorant, offensive president of my lifetime. Today, without naming Hill, President Trump demanded an apology, tweeting, "ESPN is paying a really big price for its politics. Apologize for untruth." This from a president who rarely, if ever, apologizes. The president's press secretary Wednesday suggested the sportscaster should lose her job.
I think that's one of the more outrageous comments that anyone could make, and certainly something that I think is a fireable offense by ESPN.
Today, Sanders was asked whether the network should fire Hill.
That's not a decision that I'm going to make. That's something for ESPN to decide.
The National Association of Black Journalists says it supports Hill's First Amendment rights. The sports anchor has deleted the offending tweets, posting, "My comments express my personal beliefs." Late tonight, ESPN's president sending out a company-wide statement reiterating its social media policies that